Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you the Passion hobby room coloring activity right here. As you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here is like a portrait right here of me, and basically that I went ahead and drew this right here. Of course, from a picture, and like with anybody that may say that with most portraits, that more likely that to look at, let's say, still life, and then actually trying to draw it from still life, or some if anybody else has any type of done any type creative arts to where that they actually draw it from maybe from a reflection from the water, or maybe on the other side of the room, it's like any type of reflection, it's like related to like maybe the cast shadow or something like that. But basically, you see right here is I would hinge right here is a picture right here of me, and I would be of course this was would be an example right here of me sitting in a rocking chair. It is, I think it would have been about whenever I was at least about maybe 12 months, something like that, just about a year old. But you see right here is that with this picture, I may have explained quite a few related videos about talking about is like what you see right here is that like I would be wearing like say an outfit right here would be like what say labeled as for the Smurfs. And with most if anybody has ever seen that before, but just knowing about it, I'm like, yeah, that I think I probably drew the picture a number of times to where if most of us can quite understand knowing about, yeah, you probably seen my artwork talking about what was seen on the picture, and just knowing about that the whole purpose about right here, and I'm doing this activity right here is basically talking about is that so far as Passion Hobby Room is that the type of passion, of course, if most of us have gone to any graduations or anything like that, and maybe heard of from a speech something like that about I was talking about with knowledge, and then of course you can talk about say for smart degrees, stuff like that. And basically though, that like with anybody that may wonder though that whenever we go to school and get our training, and of course get a job, stuff like that. And just knowing about the types of important parts about the understanding about, you say it is with working, and of course on your hand too, that knowing about, I kept thinking about, is that a lot of things that, one of the reasons why I gave this, I titled this activity right here is for the Passion Hobby Room, is basically talking about anybody that may knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that it pretty much, starts out as maybe like a hobby until, you keep practicing, and then you keep working on it until you start liking it. I guess with anybody that would maybe say that that they after they try something and then they say that they don't like it, and then all of a sudden they go to something else, and then they don't, and then they decide that they want to go ahead and get back in the hobby again. And like with anybody that may wonder though that anything that you do in life, that's related to, like, say, a career of knowing about that, you say like a speech therapist, or if it's a doctor or anybody like that, and then you decide you want to get into art, and I think sociology, or if it's any type of science study or anything like that. But basically, of like with anybody, then I'm like, I can tell anybody here, I'm like, yeah, that so far with Hobby Room is that does everybody have a hobby room? It's like a type of room to where I can tell a few people that knowing about whenever I drew this, I kept thinking that if I would actually look at my own artwork, knowing about how I drew myself sitting there on a rocking chair, and if the rocking chair, of course, is in level balance, it is usually a lot of times it goes by say even balance, and if it's like we say the five like which calls like say the baby rocking, I think the infant rocking chair it would be called, but other than that you see right here is that like say with the rocking chair, and basically that what I'm gonna go ahead and do right here, like with anybody that may say that I'm like, yeah, I draw this right here from a photo, and then after I work a few things, maybe using the crayons, and then I go ahead and maybe work some things on Photoshop. And anybody that may wonder that, I'm like, yeah, that you ought to get some. I'm sure working with Photoshop that may take a few minutes too, and like with anybody that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that most exciting part, of course, about is knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that working with the tools and stuff like that. But on the other hand, that knowing about that, yeah, that if most of us are familiar with Photoshop, and part of the reason why I'm doing this activity right here is basically talking about is that for the Passion Hobby Room, is that knowing about a type of room to where that like with anybody that besides maybe the bedroom, a type of room to where any kid that has a strong passion for something. I was going to think about naming this activity right here Children's Passion, but then on the other hand too, really for most kids and adults, it's like for any persons is known about is like basically anybody that more likely has a real strong passion towards something, working on something. And basically that I kept thinking about, well, a type of program. A lot of things that you may think though that are like anything that we call dream about. Am I talking about? I'm like, yeah, going into space, or if it's about becoming an archaeologist or specialist or anything like that. But one of my passions, of course, that I can remember thinking about is like to develop a program, kind of like Photoshop, to where you can actually be creative, and then and I know that they probably have a lot of they probably have a lot of programs though, but all they had to note about that the type of program I'm talking about would be like a program to where that you can actually do a lot of stuff with just by starting with one thing, kind of like this right here, that if I were to actually scan this, I'm like anybody that may say that a lot of times with most paper that you have right here, this would be about 13 inches, I think, by 8, 13 by 8 inches long paper, and then by the time you actually scan it and then upload it to like a program like Photoshop, or if it's InDesign or some program like that, you may have access to a lot more features. And basically anybody probably think that I'm like, yeah, that knowing about that besides maybe surfing the internet, but on the other hand, if you were to actually draw something like this and scan it and actually upload it to your computer, and then all of a sudden it's like that all of a sudden that you have access to that you're able to open up the file, and then if you want to convert it to a PDF file, and then any other type of file, and then do some editing, maybe on Paint Networks or anything like that, Photoshop, or if it's I don't know if there's a program called Scene Mask. There's a one called Scene Mask or something like that. I can maybe think of maybe 8 different programs that I don't even know that exist. I'm like anybody probably say that the things that it's easier to say other than done, but on your hand too, the way I think about it, you can maybe think of a name and then you don't know if it exists or not. I'm like, anybody may say, I'm like, that with most of these companies though, that they may say that they make their money somehow, but on your hand, the way I think about it, anybody probably say, don't spoil the secret. Now, I'm like that if you actually say it, then more likely somebody could discover it. But on your hand, and knowing about anybody that may say though that maybe they don't know how it works until they talk to somebody maybe like me or this person. But on your hand, that knowing about that, we could probably say that for every puzzle piece, of course, of the job of knowing about how a program works, and like with anybody that may say it, like it's hard, but. On the other hand, and knowing about, if we were to think about, like, writing a letter, and then just like, you say, what I'm doing right here is just adding in some detail right here is for my hair. And basically, the whole purpose about anybody may think about, besides wanting to have your own room whenever you were younger, it was, and then having this and having that, but like I can, I think I may have told everybody here already a few times that like the things that I wanted whenever I was a kid, including a computer and maybe my own telephone in my bedroom, stuff like that. But a lot of things, of course, that I have now, and I keep thinking about that. Yeah, that whenever people fight over them at the time, don't know why they do it, but it's like people I guess fight, knowing about whose turn is whose. But on your head that you have right here is that right here is you have right here is the sandpaper, and basically though that with the sandpaper that a lot of the videos that I have done, of course, is that talking about is like I have not I don't think used too much sandpaper. Anybody may wonder about usually if it's the eraser, the eraser that may work just a little bit better, because really that if sandpaper is mainly for like working with wood surfaces, like if there's a material called crotang or crozang or something like that, it's like made like a stone material. But anyway, here there's like a little bit of sandpaper, and then right here I keep thinking about I use for the hair, and in the photo though that there was like a few dark spots. And you had to tell them, like, what do you call those dark spots in the photo, to where that they kind of appear. But compared to looking at something in real life and then looking at the photo, usually what does the photo capture? Anybody that may wonder though, usually a lot of times, what does the photo capture whenever you take a picture compared to if you actually draw this with your hand and say with realism? And like with anybody that may say about, it may be easier to just snap that. Take the picture and then upload it, but on your hand too, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if you would actually take the photo though, that would it show this type of detail, and of course, if you, I'm like anybody that may say, I'm like, yeah, do you do what you want with the picture? If you want to post, if you want to upload it, open it up with Photoshop or something like that, if you want to add some special effects, and I can tell anybody here that one program maybe I can dream about having is the kind where maybe you can add some special effects, and what kind of special effects could I add using this charcoal pencil right here? I can tell anybody here, maybe erase it a few times and maybe draw it back in a few times, and just do different tones of art right here, but for like say the type of special effects. And more likely, if I were to actually open this drawing right here up in like Photoshop, and then it's possible I can maybe add quite a few more special effects. And I'm like, yeah, that if anybody were to say, I'm like, if you want to see them, well, I tell you what, if anybody wants to see them, then more likely that I'm sure I'll have something later. But on their hand right now, I'm just saying that. Talking about this drawing right here, and then on your hand that knowing about that I keep thinking though, if I'm pretty busy, of course, besides to say in the classroom, but on your hand that knowing about is you have right here is this artwork right here that I'm doing, and also talking about right here, I've talked say for the word for revenge, and a lot of anybody that may wonder though that with most of the time with revenge is about. Anybody that may say that it means payback. For payback, like anybody that may say that if somebody that don't treat you right, then you gotta treat them right. Treat them wrongly back. Something like that. Somebody pushes you. If somebody pushes you, you have the right to push them back. Like anybody probably say about a way of how to solve things, and anybody probably say, well, he started it or she started it. They started it, but like on the hand to knowing about the proper way, of course, of how to solve it. But the problems is knowing about is like one way to how to solve it is just knowing about for whoever that started. All about the part of reason about what's the biggest part of the problem, and knowing about that they're just mad because if it's anything maybe related to jealousy or anything like that. But the way I think about though is anybody probably say about sometimes if you cannot ignore them, then try to work out the situation by saying it like like that keep pushing me, then it more likely anybody probably say about ways how to break up an argument or any type of situation though. But on the hand and to the knowing about that really if it's worth it or not. But anyway, but basically that have right here is like say a camera, and like with anybody that may say about in the hobby room that they would maybe like to have a camera, like something about looking through the camera, and then they have right here is like a memory stick, and then you have 3 different calculators right here. The kind this right here is the big touch kind. This right here is like they said the data I think made by the Texas Instrument. But anyway, we have these different calculators right here, and anybody that may say that really, who would want one of those in their hobby room? But the way I would think about it, though, is that knowing about working with, say, with the measuring, if you were building a table or anything like that. But on the other hand, knowing about that, I'll go ahead and use right here as a sandpaper. I may use a little bit of the eraser too for say it's like if this is supposed to be like say carpeting right here. But anyway, but talking about, I could tell anybody here that the one thing I've been thinking about a lot of times is like with most parents, they could probably ask if it's going to be parents or anybody, aunts, uncles, who, whichever family relatives, and they may ask, it's like, how did you kids grow up so fast? And I may have told everybody here, knowing about, from the time, that goes on it is, but on the other hand, the way I think about it, I also go by answering the question, knowing about the thought about it is that from how you keep the parents busy, I'm like for how we stay busy with what we do, and more likely that seems like that's like the best answer. I'm like I can tell anybody here that until I'm a parent, I keep thinking that it's like the best answers for how did it's like how did you grow out of outfit so fast? How did you grow out of the diapers so fast? How did you get from the sippy cup to the drinky cup, the strolley cup, or something like that? How did you how did you grow out of that comb so fast, or how did you grow out of that swimming suit so fast, or how did you grow out of that radio or that bubble bath Tonko shampoo or something like that? I'm like anybody that may wonder though, how'd you grow up so fast? And knowing about as time for what keeps us busy. And I can tell anybody here that knowing about that seems like that from all the time more likely in the world, and more likely we may say that we've tried almost everything, and just knowing about we don't really want to know what we want to do. But for whatever that keeps us busy, more likely anybody probably say about that nothing that keeps you really busy, then more likely that like talking about is like you don't know what you really want to do. And it's like for a career it is, but on the other hand, that knowing about, I can tell anybody here that this is supposed to be right here as me, and like I can maybe do some more editing, of course, maybe like on Photoshop, but on the other hand too, that talking about is like from growing up, for growing up that a lot of times the question is like how so fast. And like with most parents, that they can maybe say that I'm like, how did you kids grow up so fast? How did you grow out of that so fast? And knowing about, for what keeps for what keeps I can maybe see for what keeps, I can maybe go ahead and say us, but for what keeps us busy. And half the time I really just think though I would say about maybe 50% sure that I'm like that's like the best answer there is. I'm like if anybody were to think about maybe going to answers.com or so you on Yahoo and thinking about, I'm like that the best answers for how we grow up so fast. How did our t-shirt size grow so fast, and how is it that the plants grow so fast, and how is it that we grow out of something so fast? I'm like that seems like that there seems to be that same wonder, but then there could be a different answer to each one of those, such as it's like how did the water get so how did the water get so, how do blankets get so soft, stuff like that. And like with anybody that wonder about, know about by each question, if there's an answer to every question. But on the other hand, too, that knowing about the whole parts about, the Passion Hobby Room, and knowing about a type of room, anybody probably say about if anybody dreams about having a number of things that they really want to spend a whole lot of time learning. And like with anybody, tell anybody here, I have right here is these 3 different rulers, and they're pretty much anybody probably say like, yeah, I'm not spending no $5 or so on each ruler. I'm like, I have about 3 or 4 different kinds around here, and I guess you say that they are about the same thing. I'm like that there's like this right here, I guess will be like say an architecture type ruler, and then this right here is a calculator, like a reader ruler, and then this right here is like to say the I think that one of them is a Mars ruler. But anyway, anybody that may wonder though that especially if they're working on something, if it's a class assignment or if it's anything related to a project, a gift or anything like that, you may wonder, I'm like, why would I, especially if we're maybe talking about, perspective. I'm like, knowing about if it's measuring or if it's, anything to do with calculus, or if it's geometry or anything like that. This is it's in a way, I'm if I want to position the pencil right here and then trying to draw, a straight line and having to move the ruler every time I turn around, and maybe it's much easier maybe on the program. But on the other hand, and knowing about them like anybody, I can tell anybody here that like there are some things that of course that maybe I don't like to do either, such as dealing with the ruler and it's not drawing the straight line like I wanted to, etc., etc. But on the other hand too, that knowing about that, knowing about that, that a lot of things that I do have that more likely I'm grateful for, knowing about that the things that such as like maybe my own work area. I can tell anybody here whenever I do my homework, I kind of like want my own work area where I can concentrate. And like with anybody that may say, I'm like almost everybody has one of those things, but I'm like, I don't know. Like with anybody, if they would be working on an assignment, and then the next thing you know, you think about, I'm like, that they don't have their own work area, that they may have to, they may have to work somewhere where it's not very, say if it's called pleasant, it's not very clean, and you're not very comfortable, stuff like that. But on the other hand, and knowing about, I'm like, that say with the charcoal pencil, and I have this other, the 2B pencil, and like with anybody, I'm like talking about. There's probably a lot more things I could probably do on Photoshop, but then you have right here is working with these different colors. And like we say in the background of this hobby room, I can maybe have, I say maybe a pool table, or if it's a tent, or if it's a play tent, any type of games, if it's board games, or if it's like any type of a TV entertainment, stuff like that. But I could tell anybody here that knowing about a lot, I don't probably have everything I've dreamed about having in a hobby room, such as like maybe a hot air balloon on a stand or anything like that, 3D projectors or anything like that. But on the other hand too, to knowing about that with one piece, of course, I can kind of keep in the puzzle here. I can tell anybody here about the program what I went ahead and called Subject Archive, of a type of program to where I keep thinking about it don't exist. I'm like, what if, let's just say if it takes me a long time to learn it, and then it maybe teaching somebody else about how it works whenever I only started with so much. And like with anybody that may say that for how the details from how you drew the face, and then of course for how you positioned yourself in the chair, and then what you drew in the background. And like anybody that may say, I'm like, how do you do that? And I'm wondering also, is that on Photoshop that you were actually able to do it on like the 4-ups, type resolution, screen resolution? I want to know how you did that. And then I can tell anybody here that a lot of things that you may think about whenever you're a kid and whenever you're growing up, you may think about something and then thinking about it, it's so impossible for you actually to do it. And the only way that it could be possible it just seems like that nowadays it seems like the best answer, somebody that may tell you that you just have to go be at the right place and maybe be with the right teacher, but really about anybody probably say about it, it's like no way, you can't teach yourself how to do it professionally. But there may be one skill that, of course, that I think I still have, that what you call it, with most professionals would probably say that it's pretty amazing. Talking about is like, yeah, if I were to work right here with art, and then knowing about, maybe besides about how I drew this picture right here, but just knowing about, that like with anybody that may say, I'm like, if it's measured by, by, it's like we talk about, say, for perspective. And if anybody knows what I'm talking about, like, I don't know, I'm like, let's just say that with perspective, though, I can tell anybody here that, like, usually with most of the time with perspective, that you have these, like a horizontal, it's like a horizontal line at about right here, and basically that, like, sort of a line, you say with perspective. Like with anybody that, I don't know, I'm like, with most of my practice, it's all about with shapes and objects, but I don't know about that, about pictures, though. I'm like anybody pressing with portraits and pictures, I don't know how well that they would go with perspective. But on the other hand, I would probably say that maybe that, use a shape, on a chair or something like that for, like, say, a meeting for, say, for perspective. But anyway, but talk about right here is like, that if I would actually use this picture right here and add some, like, some special effects, and like with anybody, I could probably say that maybe special effects would be my favorite. And if I dreamed about developing a program to where I gave it a name and think about how it's used and how I work the controls and et cetera, and just anybody would maybe think about, how did you do that? It's like, is it all about, going with the flow, or is it all about the fact about, I learned that whenever I was in the 5th grade, or I'm like, actually I took lessons at home, or I took lessons, of course, in the sections, in class or something like that, or I learned, just by, like, what you call thinking about, between cause and effect, something like that. I thought about it, and then before I actually did it, I actually did this or did that. But anybody probably say about, really, can everybody explain everything, anybody, any witness that they see you doing something, and then they come up to you and ask you, how did you do that? And it's like, how did I do what? Like, well, how did you do the cartwheel and able to stand and do the handstand or something like that? Like, you do the stand for about a minute and then go back down or something like that. Or, how did you add the special effects and color, say, text, you say, inside that work of art, say on the shoulders or something like that. But on the other hand, to the top, I say with Passion Hobby Room, any kid would maybe say that a lot of things that they dream about, that they may say it's all just what you call fantasy. If anybody probably ever heard of that meaning of, like, what you call time travel. To me, the way I think about it, I usually go by saying, for time travel, from how I used to draw and then work my skills as a kid, and then from the time I was growing up, I keep thinking about, to going back in time, just to draw maybe with the crayons, and actually, work with something based on the computer, and maybe work with something based on the calculator. That's like what you call, like, the only time travel that really exists. You see, like, the way I put about it. But on the other hand, too, that knowing about, it's like we say with any type of a Passion Hobby Room, basically talking about is that the things that you're good at. So if I would acknowledge, and like with anybody that may say, like, if you were to actually develop a software or invent anything, it is, and seems so impossible. Why does it seem so impossible? Because you ain't got the right material. But I can tell anybody, I'm like, really, maybe all it really, takes is what you call, anybody that may say it takes self-confidence, but knowing about anybody probably say about, you hear that almost every day, never say never, keep your passion possible. And like with anybody, if anybody has ever talked about it, and like with anybody that may say, like, what does never say never mean? You hear it almost every day, but you just, does it take time just for you to see it, etc., etc. And I don't know if I could really speak about the truth about everything, but on the other hand, too, my best opinion is knowing about, it's like besides, to give it some time, keep working on it, you'll see what happens. But on the other hand, that knowing about, to keep working on, you say, the Passion Hobby Room, anything that you may have learned inside of a room, maybe at home or anything like that. Anybody probably say about, you really, you kind of say you kept it a secret from all those years because you didn't think that people believed you. You didn't think that it was the right way of how to learn, etc., etc. But I can tell anybody here that I kept thinking about a lot of stuff that I'm good at. It's not going to be a career one of these days, but I don't know. There may not be enough proof that I'm wrong, but on the other hand, and knowing about, I'm like anybody will probably say about that, there is such thing as a program to where making like what you call doing corrections on, see, or displaying them, and anybody probably say that more likely that there is a program called what you call face facelets or something like that, or if it's anything like Subject Archive. One of the programs that I was thinking about would be called Subject Archive. Like Subject Archive would be like what you call like I may have spelt it already, but on the other hand, basically Subject Archive, it's basically a program to where if you actually start very small and actually work your way up. And like with anybody, I can tell anybody here, one of those examples knowing about what can you draw just by a straight line. If you were to start with a straight line like that right there, a straight line that's measured by less than an inch. The type of Subject Archive I'm talking about, if you start right there, it's like with the line just like that right there. What type of work do you think that you would be able to work with that? Like with anybody that may say that, that draw a box, draw an X, and then so that's my meaning for Subject Archive. And like with anybody that may wonder though, that I'm like, yeah, that there's a program, kind of like what you're talking about, but of course it's not done on paper. It's done using the tentacle pad or something like that. The pad, maybe something that's made by like say a Toshiba type brand, or if it's a Panasonic or any type of electronic type pad, reading pad, something like that, like based on like say on the smart Apple device or anything like that. But but tentacle pad or something like that. But anyway, anybody probably say about a lot of things that we used to call toys. It seems like that they turned into careers, and like with anybody that may wonder though, electronic, notepad, stuff like that, stuff on Word, and half the time, anybody that may wonder though, that this stuff right here, more likely that you probably saying like, could it be what you call discovered by us? So like, the GPS navigator, stuff like that. But on the other hand, too, I kept thinking about a lot of things that we may dream about, of knowing about, is that so far as the Passion Hobby Room, knowing about that we may think about that the name particular, if there's a name particular, if there's a file in particular by name of, Matt, it's like from Matt. If there's a file by the name of Matt Walls, Matt Walls. If there's a file by the name of Matt Walls, then I guess what would I use it for? I'm like at the time, anybody probably saying by Matt Walls. I'm like, I can go ahead and put like say for JPG file. It is like with anybody if they're familiar with like any type of program, like say based on saved on the C file, Matt Walls, and basically that. If you were to give it a name like that, I'm like, create a file, start with something, and then basically that you may think about anything that you create, more likely it's not useful. It's useless. It's not going to get you anywhere. But on the hand, to anybody probably saying, it's all a matter of time of knowing about whenever your stuff, is interesting, becomes interesting, and anybody probably saying by it's possible that anybody may be passionate about it, of knowing about whatever that you work hard for, that more likely it's possible that you may get passionate about it. So, but I don't know. I'm like anybody that may wonder, but I can't promise anybody anything. But on your hand, too, that knowing about, say, the best of luck of knowing about is that, like with me especially, that, whenever I look at my own photos, I keep thinking about whenever I was young, looking at my own pictures and just thinking about is like for knowing about that, I was the type of person who that, wanted that kind of a attention, knowing about. I'm like, yeah, that was my artwork. My artwork means a lot to me. And anybody probably saying, like, yeah, is that pretty much a part of you? I'm like, almost. I'm like if it's chemistry test or anything like that, anything that you really like, enjoy doing, even during your spare time, a lot of things that you spend your time on, even during your spare time, it just seems like it's a part of you. And, part of you by saying is knowing about if you're going to be talking to other people that maybe have the same passion and maybe have a stronger passion, but just knowing about anybody probably saying like, you don't feel a part of the group because somebody else has an even stronger passion. But I keep thinking about is like knowing about that each puzzle piece, more likely they'll probably say that each puzzle piece, I go by puzzle piece, but then I can also use like maybe, each seashell or each feather or maybe each set of fabric, maybe each bow or something like that. I'm like that there's like what you call a number of pieces inside of a job. Like there's a number of parts. I say there's a number of say important task inside of a job to where it seems like that there may be one person or maybe a few people that know quite a bit. And like with anybody that may wonder though, that nobody's going to want to hire me because but I'm like, yeah, that just knowing about, you just never know about knowing about, who's surprised of what you can do and knowing about the amount of time spent, to what you discovered, that it's possible. Anybody probably say like, there may be some people that may call it a magic power or just magic passion, but or knowledge. But on your hand too, the way I think about it, I'm like anybody probably say I'm like it's all about what you call dream, but a dream to say for for the hard work. But on your hand too, that knowing about like with anybody, like you say tell anybody, say for the best of luck, it's like for whichever that they pass. But like we say if we were kids though, if we're kids, we have our mind quite open to a lot of things. And a lot of times anybody probably saying like, that they may say that's too hard, etc., etc. But on your hand too, that knowing about is like, thanks for watching everyone. And I like to say this, like talk about a lot of things that we may think that are made up, or that a lot of things that we may say that we're not going to get anywhere with them. But just say is like, to work harder towards our goals. And that's basically that, like you say, is knowing about, is like, say for the kid, keep the passion of like, no matter really, anybody probably say, no matter if it takes maybe a year just to, get to it's like for your goals. It's like, to work hard for your passion. But, all right, now like I say for the Passion Hobby Room color activity. It's like you talk about it's like for passion here, and anybody that may wonder though, a lot of things that we may have thought about, maybe thought that were made up, or like say like what you call something that you thought was made up, and anybody probably say like maybe good idea, bad idea, etc., etc. But there was a lot of things, of course, whenever I was young that of course I thought more likely were made up, such as maybe if it's cartoon characters, or if it's type of words, speech, stuff like that. And like with anybody that may wonder, I'm like, yeah, that movies or anything like that. But on here too, it's like talking about, say, with passion, knowing about, how do you know more likely whenever passions are real? And like with anybody that may wonder about, do you just have to see it with your own eyes and share it to other people that and trust, stuff like that, or it's like you go to like say a tech school and then as you share it there. But then just knowing about is like with anybody that wonder, what makes passion, of course, real. If I say so, with the Passion Hobby Room, and basically like with anybody that may say it, like it's all about the fact about from how much hard work that we are willing to put into it and knowing about how it's explained, and more likely it's possible, you say, to arrive at the answer, knowing about, it's like so far as say to work hard, for our goals. I talk say for the future, it's like talk say for the Passion Hobby Room.